Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Crypto Philanthropy, your weekly guide to crypto-powered change. Nick Mikhalevsky, Senior Sales Manager here at the Giving Block, and really excited for today's episode. We have another very special guest, and without further ado, really excited to welcome Woodrow Rosenbaum, who is the Chief Data Officer for GivingTuesday. And like always, I like to start out with the quick bio, so I'm actually going to read out the full bio here and then welcome Woodrow to the show. So as Chief Data Officer for GivingTuesday, Woodrow has been instrumental in shaping the global generosity movement, which has led the groundbreaking research and analysis of individual giving behaviors. He leads the GivingTuesday Data Commons, which brings together a coalition of more than 2,000 collaborators, coordinated through 8 working groups, as well as data teams around the world, to understand the drivers and the impacts of generosity to inspire more types of giving. Now, Woodrow brings expertise in moving markets and transforming audiences, from passive participants to active and vocal ambassadors. And Woodrow is the founder of With Intent Strategies, an international agency specializing in brand reimagination. Woodrow was a member of the Generosity Commission Research Task Force and is a past co-chair for Global Impact Canada's Board of Directors, where he now serves as strategic advisor and was previously a fellow at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard Kennedy School. Woodrow, we are so excited to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Happy to have this conversation again.
Yeah. So GivingTuesday's right around the corner. We'll get into all that, but we always like to start at the beginning. Woodrow, would love to hear kind of like the genesis story of, your start, what brought you into philanthropy, and maybe how that led to your arrival with GivingTuesday.
Sure. So I actually didn't have really any philanthropy experience before GivingTuesday, or very little. And my background is in commercial marketing, coming from a world where we have really good data about the ecosystem that we're working in, how various actors perform, what the marketplace looks like, customers and consumer response. And I started getting involved in this philanthropic world a little bit shortly before GivingTuesday, essentially as kind of a side project. And that grew into some experimenting with various interventions, looking at how people bring themselves to support charitable causes and how we can inspire more of that. And then when GivingTuesday was launched in 2012, I got involved in Canada, essentially by helping to launch the movement in Canada. And then one thing led to another. And as that community grew and the intervention, the day of GivingTuesday, got bigger and bigger, everybody involved wanted to have better sense of like what's actually happening on this day. Can we benchmark the impact of that day and the movement? And the data really didn't support that. So we started building the infrastructure and the data resources that were necessary in order to answer that question. And then that opened up just a huge spectrum of potential research into the nature of generosity, its drivers, and how behaviors intersect and interact.
Okay. And I think a lot of our audience certainly, knows GivingTuesday. Everybody's kind of getting ready for it coming up in the next month. And, you've helped build sort of the data commons side of things into one of the largest kind of like, data collaborations, I think, in giving. What has some of that research revealed? And when you started this, what were some of the assumptions? How has some of those giving behaviors evolved over time? Kind of pull back the curtain for us a little bit.
Yeah, so it's been in some ways really eye-opening, and in others more kind of validating of what the theory of change has been since the beginning of GivingTuesday as a movement. The key thing I think that our data assets allow us to do is to look at charitable giving in a broader context, really looking at the holistic ecosystem of generosity. And one of the things that has been really clear is people's generosity is very prolific and diverse. And I think perhaps surprising to some in the nonprofit sector, that's a feature, not a bug. That doesn't mean that these behaviors are competitive. They're really not. and that there's a lot of potential in that generosity ecosystem that is untapped. And people are giving in their communities all of the time in many ways. For nonprofits, that hasn't always been easy to navigate. And I think that we're seeing a kind of disconnect between how nonprofits engage and how people are showing up in their communities. But what's really important is that that challenge, that issue is not situated with the giver. People are ready and willing to be generous, and that's been really clear. And then in terms of the trends that we've seen over time, I mean, we can see what happens on Giving Tuesday, and it looks a lot different than what happens on a kind of annual and aggregate basis. Giving Tuesday's this biggest day for donor acquisition in the nonprofit sector. It's also not just about money. Most people who participate in more than one way. They're not just giving their money. In fact, although in the US, the most common behavior is monetary giving, only giving money is the least common behavior. And that's actually, that environment looks a lot more like how people give every day. But our fundraising the rest of the year doesn't lean into that more kind of relational approach. And what we see is a consistent trend over time for this industry, the sector, to be reliant more and more on major givers and having less and less of a diverse donor base. And what's clear from our analysis, not just of Giving Tuesday, but of giving year round, is it doesn't have to be like that, that we can change those trends.
Yeah, and this year has been kind of an interesting year for a number of reasons. Has anything stood out this year so far? Any new trends emerge? I mean, it's been a different year for a variety of reasons for a lot of nonprofits that we speak to, maybe a little bit more so than in the past. Anything that's been surprising to your team?
Well, I mean, I will say, I don't know about surprising, but there are a couple of things that are really important right now. First, we look on an ongoing basis at how Americans feel about their giving and their communities. And for the first time at the beginning of this year, what we saw was that people who are less politically extreme in their views are feeling an increased sense of isolation, less belonging in community. And that's really problematic and important. And also, although on the one hand, we could see that as a threat to engaging those people and keeping them engaged, but really, I think we should be seeing that as we're an opportunity to help them feel connected again, give them that sense of belonging. Because the other thing that it became really clear in our research is that generous behavior makes people feel a greater sense of belonging, more connection to their communities and society at large, and helps with trust of each other and of nonprofits and a sense of agency, and reduces polarization. So I think it's really important that in the social sector, not just nonprofits, but broadly speaking, people who are advocating for causes recognize that we have this need and opportunity to provide people with that connection and that sense of agency. The other thing that's very clear, so we did an analysis that really quantified where the big missed opportunities are for nonprofits. And we think there's at least $52 billion a year that we're missing out in donations because we're not leveraging people's generosity. We're not giving, and we're not inviting people to give as much as they are willing to give. And this year, what's clear is that disconnect might even be growing, because we're seeing higher rates of response from citizens to charitable solicitation, but we're not seeing organizations showing up and providing that invitation and opportunity. And that's a big and growing gap that is a substantial component of that missed opportunity. And part of it, I think, is a kind of misunderstanding of our relationship, the relationships that nonprofits have with givers. because we need to see ourselves as providing an opportunity as opposed to being an imposition. So sometimes the reaction when things are difficult is for nonprofits in particular to pull back and think, well, man, I guess this isn't a good time to ask. But what we see time and time again, we saw this very strongly in 2020 with the onset of the pandemic. When people are feeling that pressure, they want opportunities to make change and feel like they have some 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 impact when things are tough. And this is absolutely the worst time to pull back, not only because our organizations need it, but because givers want that opportunity.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've seen that, in the on the non-cash side of the house, and certainly in the crypto side, where um, organizations had to navigate some choppy waters with how the grant landscape changed, and those donors that were felt that sense to act could give in greater capacity. Crypto donors plugged a lot of grant holes this year. Really interesting to see. So that's I think that's some validating behavior of what we've kind of seen in some nonprofits that sort of led into giving those supporters that opportunity to be generous. I think is really important and interesting to hear just that quantifiable number as well. I had no idea it was even of something of that scale in the billions of dollars. I guess maybe to kind of carry along with that in the sense of expanding the community. Giving Tuesdays kind of evolved over the years. The Giving Blocks kind of, partnered, with Giving Tuesday, Crypto Giving Tuesday, sort of the exact same day. We've brought in other initiatives like Daft Day and things like that, with sort of these movements kind of piggybacking on, Giving Tuesday and these adaptations. Has that influenced Giving Tuesday? Have you seen new behaviors emerge, with all of these adjacent movements kind of, around Giving Tuesday?
So what we see pretty clearly is that giving moments drive participation. And Giving Tuesday was an example of how you can really intentionally create that moment of collective action that inspires people to give because they want to get in on the fun. It provides that urgency without an emergency. And we also see that, again, because there's so much elasticity in the donor market and there's so many ways people want to get involved, that kind of the more of those opportunities there are, the better for all of those opportunities. And we saw this earlier, like in 2016, it was very, very noticeable with disaster relief in the months leading up to Giving Tuesday, setting new records. And that was a really good indicator that these moments are generative, because a lot of people were thinking, people believe in donor fatigue, even though it's a myth. And folks thought, well, Americans have given so much to disaster relief in September, October, Giving Tuesday is going to be suppressed. We didn't think that'd be the case, and it wasn't. It was a new record. More importantly, people who had given to disaster relief efforts the month prior were more likely to participate and donate on Giving Tuesday, not less likely. And I think a lot of people in the nonprofit sector were surprised at that, because they expect a kind of scarcity, zero-sum game, competitive environment, but that's not. We're actually in a much more of an abundance environment. And it made perfect sense to me. That's the customer. These are generous people. They're getting connected to organizations. They're primed to give. That, of course, they were more likely to give. They'd already demonstrated that they had that tendency.
Wow, interesting. I definitely could certainly understand from a nonprofit standpoint of that hesitancy, but that's really interesting that it actually is the opposite. It doesn't seem that that's been a barrier, at least wasn't at that time. I guess all right, so we've got more ways to give. People are more generous. There's new ways that people can give. We certainly live in like one of the newest ways that people
Mhm.
have been giving. I'm curious if you've noticed any sort of crypto behavior on your side.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting to see crypto as part of the Giving Tuesday experience to me in particular, because um, Giving Tuesday and cryptocurrency have a very interesting parallel history, kind of rising around at the same time. This sense of a distributed ownership model. It's co-owned, it's open source, it's grassroots. Like they're just from the very beginning seem to be very close alignment and kind of values and market position for these two um, uh, these two things to evolve at the same time made sense. Crypto giving on the day, I mean, it's newer, and organizations kind of come in and out a bit, I think. And so what we see is a kind of an ebb and a flow, and it's not. I would say it's not very predictable. But I think that has mostly to do with whether organizations happen to be leaning into that or not. I expected crypto giving to be more connected to the price of cryptocurrencies in the market, like relative to fiat. And although I do think there is some connection there, I think actually what it has more to do with, if crypto's in the news, nonprofits care about it, so they are thinking about it more, so it happens more, and less to do with this kind of found money effect. I now, not to say that that effect doesn't exist. I think it probably does, but because this is still new in the market, other factors have a greater influence on whether it's up or down.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And again, it's one of those things where sort of have to remind ourselves, this whole ecosystem, isn't even 20 years old yet. I mean, it's a sort of a nanosecond
Yeah.
in time
Yeah.
in terms of giving behavior. So I guess looking at Giving Tuesday and typical volumes, donor behaviors, geographic reach. Um, we're at what, a few weeks out when we're recording this. What types of donor behaviors should we expect to see? Anything else that's helpful for those fundraisers that are maybe going to be tuning into this or listening to this before the day arrives.
Yeah. So I mean, once again, the biggest factor in what will happen on Giving Tuesday and for the rest of the quote giving season, right to the end of the year, is how well and how much organizations show up, how many opportunities they give people to give, how engaged they are with their communities. It's encouraging to see a recent survey that Blackbaud did showed that 65% of organizations are prioritizing individual giving more than they were last year. That's to be expected. I mean, we're facing funding threats right now, more uncertain funding. We're over reliant on major givers who we're seeing early signs might be pulling back. And that's also to be expected. The major givers are more responsive to economic uncertainty than everyday givers are. And so when we're in a situation where people are uncertain, that major giver that we're too reliant on is less reliable. But if organizations recognize this huge untapped opportunity in the everyday giving market of at least $52 billion a year, Giving Tuesday is the big day for everyday giving. Now, I don't think we should just expect that we can just flip a switch and engage donors. We should be doing this, and we're going to have to be much more intentional about this. It used to be we've got a missed opportunity, and now it's existential. If we don't engage more broadly in communities, organizations will fail. So the fact that we haven't been doing that as an industry has left us with a smaller pool of donors to activate. That said, 36 million people participated last year, and that donated $3.6 billion, right? So it is certainly possible, and we need to use that moment to reignite our relationship with communities more broadly. Absolutely, as a fundraising mechanism, and also as a way of community building and giving people other ways of partnering, being less transactional, being partners in our mission. I worry about the nonprofits who are like, oh, it's noisy, I don't know how I'm going to cut through the noise. And the data really shows that that noise, quote unquote, really amplifies everybody's efforts. One of the best indications of that is the smallest nonprofits actually do best for share of wallet. Now, I don't mean that they get the biggest share. They don't, but they do 3 to 5 times better on Giving Tuesday than they do on an annualized basis. All of that activity and engagement and hype about generosity is priming the market for those asks that tap into what the majority of Giving Tuesday donors said, which was a chance to be part of a bigger group of people doing good. So all of that energy creates that sense of collective impact and the bigger group of people doing good. And it's those small community-based organizations that really provide the perfect product market fit for the opportunity to actually be in on that. It's not to say that the big campaigns don't do a lot. They absolutely do. Sure. And actually the biggest share of market is in the mid-range. The mid-sized organizations get actually the biggest share of the market. But that excitement, that desire to be part of the fun, that's what we need to tap into. And whether or not we do well on Giving Tuesday and through the rest of the year and into next is absolutely about whether we show up as partners in the good that people want to do. And again, that's what's key to unlocking this $52 billion that's there if we meet people where they are as already generous people.
Man, that is really fascinating. I can't tell you how many conversations I have about Giving Tuesday, and it seems like half the room is like, yep, we're getting ready for it. We've got our strategy. And the other half is like, it's too noisy. We don't really have like a Giving Tuesday thing. We focus on other things just because we feel like we're lost in the sauce.
I think, again, that's really misunderstanding. It's a scarcity mentality that ends up being self-defeating. But if you are that skeptical, if you are that cynical, then think about this. People who are interested in your mission are going to be asked to give on Giving Tuesday. Are you going to sit that out? Do you want to be absent from that conversation?
Right. Yep. That's great. I guess knowing that there, and I don't know how much this angle kind of is a big piece of the pie, for lack of a better term, but we've got some new tax changes coming in 26. Not sure if that affects what trends, how big of a factor that is. Obviously, there's certainly a very tangible motivation every year for, around the tax side, but anything on the tax side that might be new and different, or you think might guide behaviors, or is it, do you think it's not as impactful?
So I think it will have a noticeable effect. I don't think it'll be immediate because people will have to get through one tax year before they recognize the issue. I think there are pros and cons to these tax changes. I think the suppressing factors here are it's effectively going to make the major givers, it's going to raise their cost of donation. And at the end of the scale, where that's kind of the calculation, right? I have a cost, and my net cost is what drives what the nonprofit gets. So if that cost goes up, the nonprofit gets less, and that's what we're going to see. And again, it's a reason why we really need to get out ahead of this and build a more diverse donor base, not just in terms of size of donor, but just where they are in their life and how where their assets are. And we really need to diversify that base. We're too reliant on a small subset of donors. Corporate donations may also suffer because of these tax changes. The other side of the ledger is the potential incentive for everyday givers. The challenge there is the tax receipt is a much smaller has a much smaller effect on whether or not someone's going to give and how much they're going to give in the moment. They're doing less of a cost calculation, or less likely to be doing a cost calculation, less likely to even care about the tax receipt. And so while I don't think it's going to hurt that end of the market, what really matters is, again, do these tax changes inspire nonprofits to lean more into a broader subset of donors, more into that everyday giver? And I think that the impact on fundraiser behavior will have more of a more potential lift effect than the actual tax change directly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I can completely see how that will bear itself out, or could bear itself out. It's interesting that I think, and I'm at least encouraged in that when I'm having conversations with certain organizations, they're recognizing a lot of the things that you've brought up. That's really great. I think for some of those nonprofits that are still trying to figure out what the strategy should be, it's really encouraging to maybe hear your perspective that challenges some of those assumptions, some of those hesitancies, some of the hesitancy to go and make those asks for reasons around fatigue and things like that. But I guess to maybe wrap up, is there something, and I want to really just kind of give you the floor, is there something I haven't asked about, something that you just want folks knowing as we go into this year's Giving Tuesday, and really for the balance, because Giving Tuesday is really just the kickoff to the year-end giving season. What would you tell those those frontline fundraisers or those major gift officers that are gearing up for this year?
First, I see that this is a challenging marketplace and an environment where there's increased demand on the services these organizations are providing. This is good news. People are ready and willing to give. And in some cases, despite all of the concern and the turmoil and the uncertainty in our communities, and in some cases because of it, but either way, they're there. They want to support your organization because you are giving them that sense of belonging and that opportunity to have agency within a really challenging environment. And that's really good news, because the support is there. It is enthusiastic. And if you show up, you're going to find a highly engaged population. The key is to be relevant and be in dialogue with more people in more ways. I actually think that, when we think about where does crypto giving fit in that, we need to diversify so much right now. That means lots of different kinds of givers giving lots of different kinds of ways. And that we have that opportunity, and that includes crypto. It also includes volunteering. It also includes advocacy, right? All of the ways people are doing all of these things all of the time, and you can be part of that experience for them on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we try to bang on that drum as well in terms of, opening this up to your entire donor. But the ones that do really well on the crypto side are the ones that are opening those doors to everybody, right? Not keeping this as like, I can only show this option because it's super niche to a very specific type of donor, because people have giving, motivations from all kinds of backgrounds. It's such a versatile tool in the toolkit. I guess to close things out, Woodrow, and this has been fascinating. I think that you've given folks a lot to think about, a lot of good news. I mean, I feel a lot better after having talked to you.
Excellent. That's unusual.
Where can folks learn more about you, the organization? Maybe it's something they want to dig into soon after this episode goes live, or if it's post giving season, things they want to set up going forward. Where can they learn more about you and the organization?
So the simple thing is, tools, resources, toolkits, guides, how to get involved in Giving Tuesday, how to find a community movement where you are, how to get involved with one of our 111 global movements. GivingTuesday.org is your space for everything. GivingTuesday.org/data for our data resources, our reports, our fundraising effectiveness project reports, all of the work that my team does and produces on a monthly basis, you can find at givingtuesday.org/data.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, you heard it here from Woodrow first. Check out the resources. We'll make sure to put those relevant links in the show notes. Woodrow is fantastic. Certainly we're going to hopefully get a chance to do a debrief and see how this year went. I know you guys put out a lot of great research, once the dust is settled, but this was a fascinating conversation. Thanks so much for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, everybody. Well, we can't wait to bring on some more guests. We will see you in the next weeks. We've got some really great episodes coming up. You'll definitely want to bookmark them. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.